Before we begin, if you enjoy honest conversations about family, aging, relationships, and the lessons we learn later in life, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Every day, we share stories and insights designed to help you navigate the challenges and joys of life after 60. I never imagined there would come a day when I would stop speaking to my own siblings. When we were children, we shared everything. We sat around the same dinner table. We celebrated birthdays together. We spent holidays under the same roof and believed that no matter what happened in life, we would always have each other. At least, that's what I thought. But today, many years have passed since I last had a real conversation with my brother. My relationship with my sister is little more than a distant memory. We are still connected by blood, yet, in every way that truly matters, we have become strangers. And sadly, our story is not unusual. As I've grown older, I've met countless people in their 60s, 70s, and even 80s who quietly admit the same painful truth. They no longer speak to a brother. They avoid family gatherings because of a sister. Some haven't exchanged a single word in years. How does that happen? How do people who grew up in the same home end up living completely separate lives? Most people assume there must have been one terrible fight or one dramatic betrayal, but more often, the distance grows slowly. It builds over decades, through disappointments, resentments, unequal sacrifices, and wounds that never fully heal. Today, we're going to explore the real reasons why so many siblings stop speaking after 60, and why this heartbreaking reality is becoming more common than most people realize. Part 1. The childhood wounds that never truly disappear. Many people believe that sibling relationships fall apart because of something that happens later in life. A disagreement over money, a family argument, or a misunderstanding that grows out of control. But in many cases, the real problem began decades earlier. It began in childhood. When we're young, we don't have the words to describe unfairness, favoritism, or emotional neglect. We simply feel it. And those feelings often stay with us far longer than we realize. In many families, each child is assigned an invisible role. There is the responsible one, the troublemaker, the peacemaker, the golden child, the baby of the family. And once those roles are established, they can follow people for the rest of their lives. I remember a woman named Helen, who once told me that she spent her entire childhood trying to earn her father's approval. Her older brother could do no wrong. If he made a mistake, it was excused. If Helen made the same mistake, she was criticized. As the years passed, she learned to hide her disappointment. She convinced herself it didn't matter. But it did. Even at 72 years old, she could still remember the feeling of sitting quietly at the dinner table, wondering why she was never enough. The remarkable thing about childhood wounds is that they don't disappear simply because we grow older. They remain beneath the surface, sometimes for decades. Then one day, something brings them back. Perhaps a parent becomes ill. Perhaps an inheritance is discussed. Perhaps an old family story is told once again. Suddenly, all those buried emotions return. The child who felt ignored begins to remember. The child who felt compared to a sibling begins to remember. The child who never felt truly loved begins to remember. And what appears to be an argument about a house, a will, or a caregiving decision is often something much deeper. It is decades of unresolved pain finally finding a voice. This is one reason so many siblings grow apart after 60. As parents age and family responsibilities increase, old wounds are no longer hidden by busy careers or raising children. They rise to the surface and demand attention. Unfortunately, many families never talk openly about these feelings. Instead, resentment quietly grows, year after year, until one day, two people who shared the same childhood look at each other and realize they are carrying completely different memories of the same family. And from that moment on, the distance between them can become very difficult to cross. Part 2. Life takes siblings in different directions. When we are children, our lives are closely connected. We eat at the same table. We live under the same roof. We follow many of the same rules. Even when we argue, we still share a common world. But adulthood changes everything. As the years pass, siblings begin building separate lives. One gets married and raises children. Another focuses on a career. One stays in the hometown, while another moves hundreds of miles away. Some become financially comfortable, while others struggle to make ends meet. At first, These differences seem harmless, but over time, they can quietly create distance. A sister who spent her life carefully saving money may find it difficult to understand a brother who constantly lives beyond his means. A brother who worked 60 hours a week for decades may struggle to relate to a sibling who made different choices and expects help whenever problems arise. Neither person necessarily believes they are wrong. They simply begin viewing the world through different lenses. As a result, conversations that once felt easy become uncomfortable. Topics that were once harmless suddenly become sources of tension. Politics, religion, money, parenting, retirement, health decisions. Even something as simple as how to spend a holiday can turn into an argument. What makes this especially painful is that many siblings still remember each other as they were years ago. They expect the same relationship they had at 20, even though both people have changed dramatically. The reality is that people continue evolving throughout life. Experiences shape us. Success changes us. Loss changes us. Marriage changes us. And grief changes us. After enough years, two siblings may discover they no longer share the same values, priorities, or outlook on life. Sometimes they don't even recognize each other anymore. I've spoken with many older adults who describe family gatherings as exhausting rather than joyful. Instead of feeling understood, they feel judged. Instead of feeling supported, they feel criticized. Eventually, some begin avoiding phone calls. Then they skip family events. Then months pass without contact. Before they realize it, years have gone by. The distance wasn't created by one major conflict. It was created by countless small moments where connection became harder and harder to maintain. This is one of the hidden reasons so many siblings stop speaking after 60. Not because they necessarily hate each other. Not because there was a dramatic betrayal. But because their lives have moved so far apart that maintaining the relationship begins to feel more stressful than rewarding. And when that emotional distance continues growing year after year, silence often becomes easier than trying to bridge a gap that no one seems willing or able to cross. Part 3. The heavy burden of caring for aging parents. If there is one issue that destroys more sibling relationships after 60 than almost any other, it is the responsibility of caring for aging parents. At first, everyone agrees that mom or dad needs help. Everyone says the right things. We'll figure it out together. We'll all do our part. We're a family. But reality often looks very different. As parents grow older, someone has to step forward. Someone has to drive them to doctor's appointments. Someone has to organize medications. Someone has to answer late-night phone calls. Someone has to handle emergencies, paperwork, insurance forms, and hospital visits. And more often than not, that responsibility falls on one person. Sometimes it is the daughter who lives closest. Sometimes it is the sibling without young children at home. Sometimes it is simply the one who feels the strongest sense of duty. Whatever the reason, one sibling gradually becomes the caregiver, while the others continue living relatively normal lives. At first, the caregiver doesn't complain. They tell themselves it's temporary. They tell themselves their siblings will help more later. They tell themselves family is supposed to support each other. But weeks turn into months. Months turn into years, and the help they expected never arrives. Meanwhile, their own life begins to shrink. Social activities disappear. Vacations are canceled. Personal goals are postponed. Their health often suffers from stress and exhaustion. While everyone else moves forward, the caregiver feels stuck. What makes the situation even harder is the lack of recognition. Many caregivers don't expect praise. They don't expect rewards. But they do hope their sacrifices will be acknowledged. Instead, they often hear criticism. A sibling who rarely visits suddenly questions a medical decision. Someone who hasn't helped financially complains about expenses. Another sibling appears during holidays, takes a few family photos, and leaves, believing they have done their part. Over time, resentment quietly begins to grow. The caregiver starts keeping score. Not because they want to, but because the imbalance becomes impossible to ignore. I was there every week. I handled every crisis. I gave up years of my life. Where were they? These thoughts become harder and harder to silence. Then comes the moment that changes everything. Perhaps a parent enters a nursing home. Perhaps a serious illness develops. Perhaps the parent passes away. Suddenly, decisions about money, property, and responsibilities must be made. And all those years of buried frustration rise to the surface. Arguments that appear to be about inheritance are often about something much deeper. They are about feeling abandoned, feeling unseen, feeling taken for granted. By this stage, many sibling relationships are already hanging by a thread. The conflict over caregiving simply exposes wounds that have been growing for years. And sadly, once trust has been damaged for that long, many families never fully recover. What began as the shared goal of caring for a parent ends with brothers and sisters becoming strangers to one another, carrying pain that lasts long after their parents are gone. Part 4. Money and inheritance reveal what was hidden all along. Many people believe that money destroys families. But after watching countless families fall apart over inheritance disputes, I've come to a different conclusion. Money doesn't create most family problems. It reveals the problems that were already there. When parents are alive, siblings often manage to keep the peace. Old resentments stay buried. Unspoken frustrations remain hidden beneath polite conversations and holiday gatherings. But when a parent dies, everything changes. Suddenly, difficult decisions have to be made. Who gets the house? Who receives certain possessions? How should savings be divided? What was promised, and what was actually written in the will? These questions have a way of exposing emotions that have been building for decades. One sibling may feel entitled because they were always the favorite child. Another may believe they deserve more because they sacrificed years caring for a parent. Someone else may feel cheated by decisions made long ago. The arguments rarely start with greed. They start with feelings of unfairness, feelings of being overlooked, feelings of never receiving the appreciation they believed they deserved. And once those emotions enter the conversation, even small amounts of money can trigger enormous conflicts. I've seen families argue for months over furniture worth less than a television. Not because of the furniture itself, but because each object represented something deeper. Recognition, validation, love, proof that they mattered. One of the saddest realities is that grief and conflict often arrive at the same time. Instead of mourning together, siblings begin taking sides. Instead of supporting one another, they become opponents. Every conversation becomes a negotiation. Every decision becomes a battle. Trust begins to disappear. And once trust is gone, rebuilding a relationship becomes incredibly difficult. The tragedy is that many siblings later realize the inheritance was never worth the damage. The money gets spent. The house gets sold. The possessions eventually lose their value. But the words spoken in anger remain. The bitterness remains. The broken relationships remain. This is why so many siblings stop speaking after 60. Not because of a single check, a piece of jewelry, or a family home, but because those things bring decades of unresolved emotions into the open. And when old wounds, grief, disappointment, and money collide at the same moment, some relationships simply cannot survive the impact. Part 5. When one sibling gives everything, and another only takes. One of the most painful reasons siblings stop speaking after 60 has nothing to do with a single argument. It has to do with a pattern. A pattern that repeats itself year after year until one person finally reaches their limit. Most families have a giver, the sibling who always answers the phone, the one who helps during emergencies, the one who lends money, offers rides, babysits children, listens to problems, and shows up when nobody else does. At first, giving feels natural. After all, that's what family is supposed to do. You help because you care. You help because you love them. And you trust that if you ever need support, they'll be there for you too. But sometimes that day never comes. Instead, the relationship becomes one-sided. One sibling keeps giving. The other keeps taking. They call when they need a favor. They call when they need money. They call when they need advice. Yet when you need help, they're suddenly unavailable. They're busy. They're tired. They're dealing with their own problems. Over time, a painful realization begins to form. The relationship only exists because one person continues carrying it. The moment that person stops, everything falls apart. I once heard someone say, "The fastest way to discover the truth about a relationship is to stop being useful." As harsh as that sounds, there is often truth in it. Many older adults eventually notice that some siblings only reach out when they need something. There is little genuine interest in their well-being, their struggles, or their happiness. The connection becomes transactional rather than loving. And after decades of feeling used, many people begin asking themselves a difficult question. If I weren't helping them, would they still be part of my life? For some, the answer is heartbreaking. No, not because there was never love, but because the relationship became built on expectation rather than mutual care. Eventually, the giver becomes exhausted, not physically, emotionally. They grow tired of being taken for granted, tired of carrying responsibilities that should be shared, tired of sacrificing their own peace for people who rarely sacrifice anything in return. And when that exhaustion reaches a breaking point, many choose something they should have chosen years earlier. They choose themselves, not out of anger, not out of revenge, but out of self-respect. Part 6. The hardest part is accepting. They may never change. For many people, the most difficult step isn't setting boundaries. It's letting go of hope. Hope can be a beautiful thing. It helps us survive difficult times and keeps us believing that tomorrow might be better than today. But sometimes hope becomes a trap. Many people spend decades waiting for a sibling to become more caring, more responsible, more appreciative, or more emotionally available. They keep telling themselves, maybe next year will be different. Maybe they're just going through a difficult time. Maybe they'll finally understand how much they've hurt me. Years pass, then decades, and nothing changes. The painful truth is that most people become more like themselves as they grow older, not less. The habits, attitudes, and behaviors that existed at 40 are often still present at 60, 70, or even 80. This doesn't mean people are incapable of growth. Some do change. Some sincerely apologize. Some rebuild damaged relationships. But many never do. And there comes a point when continuing to wait becomes more painful than accepting reality. One of the greatest acts of emotional maturity is learning to see people as they are, rather than as we wish they were. That realization can feel heartbreaking, especially when it involves family. Because deep down, most of us want to believe our siblings will eventually become the brothers or sisters we always needed. But life doesn't always work that way. Sometimes peace begins the moment we stop trying to change someone else, the moment we stop chasing approval, the moment we stop expecting a different outcome from the same behavior. And perhaps the most liberating lesson of all is this: you do not have to spend the rest of your life waiting for someone to become the person they have spent decades showing you they are not. Acceptance is not giving up. Acceptance is seeing clearly. And sometimes, seeing clearly is the first step toward finally finding peace. Part 7. Choosing peace doesn't mean choosing hatred. One of the biggest misunderstandings about creating distance from family is the belief that it must come from anger. It doesn't. In fact, many people who stop speaking to a sibling don't hate them at all. What they feel is something very different: exhaustion, sadness, acceptance. There is a common belief that forgiveness requires continued access to your life. But forgiveness and boundaries are not the same thing. You can forgive someone and still decide they are not healthy for you. You can wish them well and still choose not to answer their calls. You can let go of resentment while also protecting your emotional well-being. As we grow older, time becomes more precious. By the time we reach our 60s and 70s, many of us begin asking an important question: how do I want to spend the years I have left? Most people don't want to spend them arguing, defending themselves, or recovering from the same emotional wounds over and over again. They want peace. They want meaningful relationships. They want to be surrounded by people who respect, support, and value them. Sometimes those people are siblings. Sometimes they are not. And that's okay. The goal isn't to punish anyone. The goal is to create a life with less stress and more peace. Because in the end, protecting your mental and emotional health is not selfish. It's one of the wisest gifts you can give yourself in the years that matter most. Conclusion. As we've seen, siblings rarely stop speaking because of one single event. More often, the distance develops over a lifetime. It grows from childhood wounds that never healed, lives that moved in different directions, unequal caregiving responsibilities, conflicts over money and inheritance, and years of one person giving far more than they receive. The truth is that sharing the same parents does not guarantee a close relationship. A healthy relationship requires respect, effort, trust, and mutual care, qualities that cannot be created by blood alone. If you are fortunate enough to have siblings who support you, cherish them, call them, spend time with them, let them know how much they matter. But if your relationship with a sibling has become a source of constant pain, guilt, or emotional exhaustion, remember this: you are allowed to protect your peace. You are allowed to set boundaries, and you are allowed to choose relationships that bring kindness, respect, and support into your life. After 60, Many people begin to realize that time is their most valuable resource. The years ahead are too precious to spend carrying old burdens that no longer serve them. Thank you for spending this time with me today. If this message resonated with you, please share your experience in the comments. And if you enjoy thoughtful conversations about family, aging, and life after 60, don't forget to subscribe and join our community. We would love to hear your story.